We're back. I'm always delighted to say we are joined by Ambassador Yoram Ettinger, one of the people who I've regarded as an incredible, insightful analyst as well as former policy practitioner about the Middle East, his home country of Israel, its national security, and of course, the importance of all of that to the national security interests of the United States, in which he served for quite some time as an ambassador, among other things, responsible for congressional relations in the U.S. Embassy here in Washington, D.C., as well as, I believe, the Consul General for Israel's mission in Houston, Texas. He is an incredible resource, and we're always delighted to be able to catch up with him. Mr. Ambassador, welcome back to Securing America.
Thank you very much for this overly generous introduction.
Well, it's maybe overly generous, but it is well deserved. Let me ask you, sir, to start with. We are witnessing a pell-mell rush by the United States government under the Biden administration to achieve some kind of deal with the government of Iran. It's been dribbling out leaks about the kinds of concessions that have been entailed in that pursuit, and also that we're relying on the Russians to essentially be the intermediary for us in these negotiations. Give us your sense of where they are headed at the moment, whether they will, in fact, prevent Iran from getting nuclear weapons, or make them simply that much more certain to acquire such weapons.
There's no doubt that the current policy towards Iran is a copy paste of President Jimmy Carter's policy towards Iran during the late 1978, beginning of 1979, when the US approached Iran based on a series of outrageously, dramatically erroneous assumptions. At that time in 1978 and 79, as it is today. Then President Jimmy Carter, today President Joe Biden, and their teams assumed that Ayatollahs, at that time Ayatollah Khomeini, that Ayatollahs could be induced into peaceful coexistence with their Sunni Arab neighbors, and that they could be enticed to be preoccupied with butter rather than gun, with peaceful coexistence rather than terrorism and subversion. And at that time, in fact, back in 1978, 79, the president, his Secretary of State Cyrus Vance, National Security Advisor Brzezinski, and the ambassador to Tehran, William Burns, they were convinced that Ayatollah Khomeini those days would be contained, would be contended, in fact, contended to deal merely with domestic Iranian affairs. Should he get sufficient diplomatic and economic support. And the precondition was for President Carter to constrain the pro-Shah military and allow Ayatollah Khomeini to take over the control of Iran in a peaceful manner. We know the follow-up. The follow-up was taking over the U.S. Embassy, holding 63 Americans hostages for 444 days, and Iran was transformed into from the American policeman in the Gulf to America's number one enemy, threat of terrorism, drug trafficking, not only in the Persian Gulf and the Middle East, but all the way to Latin America and the US-Mexico border. The same type of assumptions preceded the 2015 agreement, the JCPOA, and the proof is in the pudding. The Ayatollahs netted some $150 billion. Very, very little was invested in upgrading standard of living in Iran. The vast, vast majority was invested in intensifying anti-US terrorism, anti-US subversion, and a continuous attempt to topple every single pro-American Arab Sunni regime. Today, we have the same series of assumptions, plus maybe one, and that one is the very naive assumption that the Ayatollah's violence and terrorism is driven by frustration, by despair, and ignoring the fact that the Ayatollahs are driven by 1400-year-old fanatic, religious, megalomaniacal vision, which cannot be contained through financial or diplomatic bonanza. The outcome already has been dramatic deterioration of a U.S. posture of deterrence. The naivete of the policy has been noted by Russia, by China, which have intensified their own pursuit of ambitions at the expense of global stability and peace, at the expense of American interest. And at this moment, it seems tragically that the US is eager to achieve another agreement with Iran and at any cost. And when you approach any negotiation with eagerness, when you approach any negotiation with a rogue element by waiving the military option, the only question is how badly are you going to be defeated in this process, and that sadly seems to be the outcome of the current negotiation between U.S. and the Ayatollahs of Iran.
That was a brilliant exposition. You've ended it just in time for us to take a very short break. When we come back, I want to ask you about Iran as the hegemon once again, but under the not so tender mercies of the mullahs who seek our destruction. That and much more with Ambassador Yoram Ediger on the other side of this short break.